War is older than writing. Almost every human society on this planet has at one point or another engaged in warfare. The desire to fight or even kill for a resource is not unique to humans either. Ants and other eusocial insects engage in both inter- and intra-colonial wars. Other species engage in violence on a much smaller scale, such as adult males fighting over mates or mothers fighting for food for their young, and certainly the entire predator-prey relationship can be thought of as a sort of war. But when we think of war, we tend not to think of scuffles or roughhousing or even hunting. We think of soldiers and armies and entire industries dedicated to the purpose of killing others of our species. War also holds a very paradoxical place in Western culture. One of the core tenets of Christianity, far and away the dominant religion of Europe and the Americas, is thou shalt not kill. Yet even in the Bible there is warfare, and YHWH himself exhorts the Hebrew people to take up arms and slaughter their neighbors. We hold soldiers in high regard, paragons of bravery, risking their lives in order to guarantee whatever supposedly noble cause the current propaganda is promoting. If you pull out a machine gun and fire on a civilian walking down the street, this is frowned upon. But if you pull out a machine gun while wearing a uniform and fire on someone else wearing a different uniform, well, that's war, isn't it? War is such a focal point of human culture that many societies had gods devoted to conflict. The Greeks went to war so often they had two different war gods, Athena to represent strategy and tactics, and Ares as an avatar of bloodshed, the destruction that war wreaks. Even good old YHWH started off as a god of war in the Canaanite pantheon, originally of equal or even lesser importance to Baal the storm god and Asherah the fertility goddess. But during the Babylonian exile, some of the Hebrews looked more and more to YHWH alone as a singular, universal god, and they eventually became what we now call Jews. Christians may claim their god is a god of love, but that's not how he started. Despite how ingrained warfare is in basically every society in the world, you can't just give a man a gun and throw him onto a battlefield. As weapons and tactics have gotten more and more complex, soldiers have needed more and more education and training. One of the first and most well-known treatises on this subject is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Intended more for officers than enlisted soldiers, it remains a fundamental work and is still taught to this day. Sun Tzu outlines basic tactics and strategic questions that any war leader will need to consider, and his work emphasizes success over honor, including a lengthy description on how to utilize spies. Much of human history is defined by such war, to the point where up until the last couple decades, history classes were more or less about learning the start and end dates of important wars and the names of the kings and generals that fought them. War is so pervasive in Western thought and culture that many people assume that conflict is humanity's natural state of being, that anyone promoting pacifism or negotiation over violence is a naive optimist.
Damn it, Franklin, we're at war.
But that hasn't stopped pacifism or diplomacy from ever happening. India has a long history of both warfare and pacifism, with Jainism and Buddhism being explicitly non-violent religions, even taking the extra step of advocating for vegetarianism. Pacifism in the West has had a harder time taking root, with Christian priests petitioning their lords to be peaceful and merciful, while those lords continued to war with each other and execute criminals. While the Catholic Church called Christian kings and soldiers to war in the Holy Land, Protestantism would later yield many pacifist sects, such as the Quakers and the Amish. But even with all those wars, Western history has also been marked by alliances and treaties and trade. There has always been a tension between the reality that peace brings prosperity, but also the tempting idea that a successful war brings glory and wealth to the victor. Spain became for a time the richest power in the entire world for its conquest of Central and South America. But the indigenous peoples who lived there were devastated by those wars of conquest, the diseases the conquistadors brought with them, and the oppression of their European overlords. Which brings us to the why. Why ever go to war? You risk the lives of your citizens, the destruction of your countryside, the hatred of your enemies. Why war? The most important and most recurring reason has been for resources, for land, for shiny metals, for food. That's why Spain conquered Mexico. But simple disagreements can bring about war as well. When two sides disagree on whose god is real, we call it a holy war. Such wars can arise from one ruler offending another, two sides arguing over whose property the apple tree is growing on, or which son should get to inherit their father's land and titles. Are any of these worthy reasons to go to war? Do any of them justify the loss of life, the destruction of land and property, and the bitter enmity that remains between the survivors? An author who concerned himself with this very question was Lloyd Alexander. Raised in Pennsylvania during the Great Depression, he joined the Army during World War II, but proved to not be a very good soldier. He did eventually get stationed in Europe, where he worked as a translator between Americans and the French. His time in Wales, though, was particularly formative and inspired him to write the work he would become most famous for, the Chronicles of Prydain. These 5 books are steeped in Welsh mythology and culture, borrowing elements from the Mabinogion, a Welsh mythological cycle that was one of the inspirations of the King Arthur stories. And yes, I neglected to mention this during the Sword and the Stone video, but Arthur is in fact a Welsh name, which makes the legendary king's status as a symbol of English nationalistic pride even more ironic. The books concern themselves with the struggles of the people of Prydain against the evil Aron, who wants to use his powers to conquer all the land and subjugate the people therein. Yet for an otherwise rather typical fantasy saga about the overthrow of a Dark Lord, Alexander consistently questions the justness and efficacy of violent war, which can be seen from the very first line of the very first book. Taran wanted to make a sword, but Cole, charged with the practical side of his education, decided on horseshoes. Where other fantasy series will focus on the glory that war can bring, romanticizing the soldier as a hero, showing the protagonist's virtue through their skill in combat, Alexander is always very clear that battle is something to be avoided. Throughout all 5 books, characters who see glory and feats of arms are either shown to be mistaken or are clearly villains to be overcome. Those who either see war as a necessary evil or something to be avoided entirely are always portrayed as being in the right. I have marched in many a battle host, Arion answered quietly, but I have also planted seeds and reaped the harvest with my own hands, and I have learned there is greater honor in a field well plowed than in a field steeped in blood. The story follows Taran, an orphan raised in Caer Dallben, as he grows from adolescence to adulthood. Initially, he is very eager to face the stock character, big bad evil guys threatening civilization, but time and again he is cautioned by those older and wiser than him to be more thoughtful and to avoid conflict where possible. "Then we should stop him," Taran declared. "Attack him, strike him down. Give me a sword and I will stand with you." "Gently, gently," chided Gwydion. "I do not say my life is worth more than another man's, but I prize it highly. Do you think a lone warrior and one assistant pig keeper dare attack the Horned King and his warband?" Taran drew himself up. "I would not fear him." "No?" said Gwydion. "Then you are a fool. He is the man most to be dreaded in all Prydain." The first 3 books follow a formula of an inciting incident where Taran runs into this entry's villain, then the vast majority of the novel is a series of unrelated low-stakes misadventures, and then our heroes fight the villain in a battle never lasting more than a single page, and the book's over. The third one, The Castle of Lear, is kind of the worst in this regard, having almost nothing to do with the overarching conflict with Aron Deathlord, apart from setting up 2 characters for minor roles in the last book, all while mostly sidelining Princess Eilonwy, the main female character in the series, and when she finally gets back her agency at the end, she uses it to give up all her magic powers. Alexander's handling of Eilonwy is probably the weakest part of the series almost 60 years on now, as she is consistently dismissed on the basis of her gender, and is almost never given the chance to showcase her skills. Her 2 main traits are bossy and talkative, and every man around her keeps telling her to go back home where she'll be safe. That said, the series does have a decent female villain, and I want to share this passage not because it has anything to do with my thesis, but because it's just fucking badass. Achren raised the sword above her head and smote with all her force against a stone pillar. Sparks flashed. The blade rang unbroken. With a scream of rage, she dashed the weapon to the ground. The sword shone undamaged. Achren seized it again, gripping the sharp blade itself until her hands ran scarlet. Her eyes rolled back into her head. Her lips moved and twisted. A thunderclap filled the hall. A light burst like a crimson sun, and the broken weapon fell in pieces to the ground. "So shall I break you!" Achren shrieked. While, for the most part, the side characters are rather one-note, operating off of one or two adjectives and a catchphrase they recite at every opportunity, feeling more like video game NPCs than actual persons with thoughts and motivations, Taran himself is richly defined, having a very clear arc across the series. Even through the first 3 books, he grows from the eager young wannabe soldier to someone more cautious and thoughtful. No, Taran said slowly. It would be folly to think of attacking them. He smiled quickly at Fluter. The bards would sing of us, he admitted, but we'd be in no position to appreciate it. Fluter sat down again, disappointed. If the Chronicles of Prydain were only those first 3 books, they would most likely be largely forgotten today. They're breezy young adult novels about good triumphing over evil and learning that wisdom is more important than warfare. But starting with the 4th entry, Taran Wanderer, the series becomes something greater. In a time of relative peace, our titular hero wants to finally learn his parentage, both for his own sense of self and with a hope that perhaps he will discover a noble origin that will permit him to marry Eilonwy. Gurgi, the shaggy ape man, accompanies him, and the two of them eponymously wander across all of Prydain, searching for that answer. Along the way, he meets nobles and peasants, knights and bards, and all manner of creatures malevolent and benign, and throughout his journey, one refrain continues to be repeated to him. She said, "Amren, our son, he was of your years, and it is his jacket you wear. He needs it no longer. Winter and summer are alike to him. He sleeps under a burial mound among other fallen warriors. Yes, he is gone," the woman added. "He rode with the battle host when they fought off raiders who sought to plunder us." "I share your sorrow," Taran said, then, to console her, added, "But he died with honor. Your son is a hero." "My son is slain," the woman answered sharply. "The raiders fought because they were starving. We, because we had scarcely more than they. And at the end all had less than when they began. Now, for us the labor is too great for one pair of hands, even for 2. In the end, he does not discover who his parents are, and in fact Alexander never reveals them, because they don't matter. It doesn't matter what blood runs in Taran's veins. It matters what choices he makes and what actions he takes. It matters how he treats the people he meets and the friends who stay with him. And in the final book, for the final battle, it is all the friends that Taran has made, all the people he has helped in his wanderings, who march by his side on his quest to conquer death. Because Lloyd Alexander never argues for complete pacifism. War is to be avoided if possible, but there are some threats that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be dealt with in any other way. "These Cauldron-born are utterly without mercy or pity," Gwydion continued, "for Iran has worked still greater evil upon them. He has destroyed their remembrance of themselves as living men. They have no memory of tears or laughter, of sorrow or loving kindness. Among all Iran's deeds, this is one of the cruelest." And yet even a supposedly just war has casualties, and Taran is never allowed to forget the lives lost along the way. Alexander spends more time mourning the dead than describing the battles that felled them. It is this exploration of what good leadership even is, what the purpose of war, the purpose of life is, that makes the Chronicles of Prydain a true classic of the genre. The last entry, The High King, was published in 1968 and won the Newbery Medal that year. The books were recommended to Willie Reitherman, and in 1971, Disney optioned the series for an animated adaptation. Pre-production began in 1973, which, with a final release year of 1985, gives The Black Cauldron one of the longest production times in the entire canon. The name comes from the second book in the series, which focused on the eponymous evil cookware that Iran used to make his deathless warriors. In a post-Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings world, many people forget that film adaptations of books, and particularly book series, very often had to condense and cut. Sequels were very rare, meaning a movie had to tell a complete story and not have to rely on subsequent films to finish the narrative. So the Disney studio had to figure out how to turn the 5 books into a single 80-minute film. The plot was almost entirely taken from the first 2 books, The Book of Three and The Black Cauldron, and Lloyd Alexander's sprawling cast of characters was winnowed dramatically. Prince Gwydion and the other Sons of Dawn make no appearance, Dalben's platonic life partner Cole was removed, and 2 princes, Ellidyr and Run, had their minor yet important storylines subsumed into Gurgi's arc. For the villain, Achren and Aran were mushed into the Horned King, who was definitely a lot more aesthetically interesting than the other 2. Originally set for a 1980 release, Ron Miller felt that the newer generation of animators needed more time, and it was pushed back. Don Bluth's and later Woolly Reitherman's departures at the end of the 70s didn't help matters, and when The Fox and the Hound wrapped production, Miller did not want to have to deal with Art Stevens again and made Joe Hale producer of The Black Cauldron, with Ted Berman and Richard Rich as directors. John Musker and Ron Clements briefly held director roles before leaving the project to work on next video's topic, The Great Mouse Detective. As the 1980s began, production on The Black Cauldron started in earnest, but for the first time since Fleischer's Gulliver's Travels, the Disney company had an actual rival.
You've been playing without an opponent, which is, as you may have guessed, against the rules.
In 1982, Don Bluth premiered his first independent feature, The Secret of Nim. While it didn't even break the top 10 for box office draws that year, it still made back twice its budget, received critical praise, and won the first competitive Saturn Award for Best Animated Film, beating out Disney's own Tron. It was a visual triumph, making good on Bluth's desire to be more innovative and daring than Woolly Reitherman's Scratchies. But despite all of this and all the drama we discussed in the prior video, the young animators really wanted to make something special. Don Bluth's success spurred them to take risks and strive for true artistic greatness rather than settling for the merely passable. They wanted to make a feature to rival Sleeping Beauty, so for the first time since that film, they returned to the widescreen format. The Black Cauldron would be the final film of any medium to be shot in Technorama. The backgrounds are sumptuous oil paintings, and building on The Fox and the Hound, the xerographic process used a wide variety of ink colors. With the Black Cauldron, xerography was finally able to match what human inkers had been able to do in the 40s and 50s. Luckily for me, we have now reached the point in the canon where Disney was very interested in showing off the production of their films as they were being made. So there's a decent amount of footage from the time of the animators and voice actors talking about the process. The visual style of the film took a while to settle. Mel Shaw started with pastel concept art as he had done for The Rescuers and The Fox and the Hound, and later Milt Kahl was dragged out of retirement to finalize character designs. However, while they sent Kahl the books to read, they didn't send him Shaw's concepts, so his designs were largely recyclings of prior ones. That's why Taran looks like Peter Pan's brother, and Eilonwy looks like a cross between Alice and Aurora. The Horned King went through the most changes in design, with his final form made by new animator Andreas Deja, who also created the final versions of the Three Witches. I am very grateful for Deja's blog, Deja View, which is the source for most of the concept art I'm showing off in this video. In the Black Cauldron's credits, Deja is listed first amongst both the animators and for character design. Aesthetically, this is his movie, which is quite an accomplishment for being the first one he worked on, and a testament again to Eric Larson, who taught Deja. This is also the film that convinced Tim Burton that maybe traditional animation was not for him. He also contributed numerous concept sketches for character designs, and all of them proved just a little too out there for the Disney style. I remain convinced that Burton has never actually seen a human being, but only had them described to him. For fuck's sake, he gave the Horned King puppets. Why does the Horned King have puppets, Tim? Though I will admit, his Gurgi, not half bad. Through this whole process, other things were happening at Disney. Ron Miller, despite being a jock and essentially a nepo baby, proved to be pretty decent at his job as president and CEO, founding Touchstone Pictures as a way for Disney to release more mature films that would clash with the image the Disney brand had built for itself, as well as the Disney Channel. He pushed for the use of the then new CGI technology showcased in Tron, and gave Tim Burton a creative outlet more suited to his style, resulting in Vincent and Frankenweenie. These are all decisions that would pay off gangbusters blockbusters in a few years, but at the time, shareholders thought they were too risky. This, combined with the slow progress on the Black Cauldron, led to Miller's ouster, led by Roy E. Disney, Walt's nephew and Miller's own cousin by marriage. He was replaced by three men whose names are indelibly etched in the brain of anyone who has even briefly studied Disney's history: Frank Wells, Michael Eisner, and Jeffrey Katzenberg. Talk about war. These three weren't the only ones trying to take over Disney, they were just the ones who happened to get Roy E. on their side. Wells became president, Eisner became CEO, and Katzenberg became chairman of Disney Studios, making him the guy in charge of the animation department. This is where things get real messy, because Jeff had zero experience in animation, only live action. For a live action film, you usually shoot a whole bunch of takes and generally have a lot of extra footage so you can shift things around during the edit. This is what Marsha Lucas did with A New Hope, and she is the reason why that movie's ending is so damn good. With animation, you don't do that. Editing is done in the storyboarding phase. Scenes are blocked and camera angles are set and timings for transitions are all chosen before anyone does any actual animation. If something is actually fully animated and put onto celluloid, it goes into the film. This is why if you ever see a supposed deleted scene from an animated film before the 80s, you get shown a storyboard slideshow with bad voice acting over top of it. But Jeffy Boy didn't know that. So when he sat in on a test screening of The Black Cauldron in 1984, mere weeks before it was supposed to release in theaters, he grabbed the physical film and started physically cutting it in the editing bay, despite everyone else around him trying to get him to stop. It took Michael Eisner himself stepping in to get Katzenberg to leave the editing bay, and even then he demanded 12 minutes of the film be removed. There are multiple YouTube channels that have uploaded fully animated scenes cut from this movie, most notably Yesterworld Entertainment, which went into great detail over each and every cut second and its particular importance. Despite being given an extra year to comply with Katzenberg's demand, it was still a headache and a half for the animators, and often scenes had to be reanimated entirely in order to properly snip out footage. Despite this, most of the cuts are fairly seamless, apart from a couple lines lacking proper context, and one very noticeable jump in the musical score at the end. Speaking of music, it was composed by Elmer Bernstein, the guy who did the score for Ghostbusters, The Blues Brothers, Airplane, and The Ten Commandments, and it fucking slaps. The music is rich with leitmotifs and melodies that constantly get stuck in my head. I said last video that Buddy Baker's score for The Fox and the Hound was one of the best in the canon, but Bernstein's for The Black Cauldron surpasses it. Part of that is extensive use of the onde maintenant, an electronic instrument similar to the theremin, where the musician pulls a cord wrapped around a finger to dictate pitch. It has a distinctive unearthly timbre used to great effect here. On July 24th, 1985, and yes, that means we're coming up on the 40th anniversary, with Katzenberg's orders met as well as they were ever going to be, The Black Cauldron was released in theaters. I'm not gonna leave you in suspense or sugarcoat this, it bombed, and hard. On a budget of $44 million, far and away the most ever spent on an animated film up to that point, the film only made $21.3 million. It opened fourth at the US box office behind the also newly released National Lampoon's European Vacation, Back to the Future, which had premiered a couple weeks prior, and a re-release of E.T., which had first come out in 1982. The animators who worked on it had hoped The Black Cauldron would be their generation's Snow White or Sleeping Beauty. Instead, it was outgrossed by the Care Bears movie that year. After its first weekend in theaters, all advertising was pulled, and for nearly 4 decades, Disney has tried to pretend this movie never existed. Is this film really that bad? Let us journey to Prydain to see for ourselves.
Shall we?
The Black Cauldron is the first film in the canon to begin with the now iconic production logo of the white castle on the blue background, and is also the first to completely abstain from opening credits, instead getting right to business with a narrated prologue. Something something evil cookpot, something something evil king trapped inside it, presumably a reference to Iran of the books.
Knowing whoever possessed it would have the power to resurrect an army of deathless warriors, and with them rule the world.
From here we get a view of Caer Dallben and the one rather shuddery use of the multiplane camera in the whole film. The farm is idyllic, a place untouched by conflict, and the first creature we see is a cat sleeping peacefully. From here we get our first looks at Dallben, the owner of the farm, and Taryn, his ward. Just as in the books, we are immediately met with our thesis.
War isn't a game. People get hurt.
The old man is voiced by Freddie Jones, an accomplished actor of both stage and screen, and the young boy by Grant Bardsley, who did so little acting that he doesn't even merit a Wikipedia article. Dallben is really only present for the first couple scenes, but Bardsley has to carry the film, and he does an admirable job, fitting a surprising amount of pathos into Taryn's knee-high boots.
But I'm not afraid. Ouch!
But even with this opening sequence, we already see the unevenness of this movie's making. There are shots that are a visual feast, easily some of the best work in the entire canon, and others where you can clearly see the ink coloring shifting from frame to frame. My guess is that most of these instances are from the animators rushing to fulfill Katzenberg's demands, and I will never forgive Jeffrey for this crime. Imagine if the entire movie looked like this. Just imagine. These first few scenes at Caer Dallben have two tasks: introduce the world of Prydain and its major players, and show us what kind of person our main character Taryn is. He yearns for adventure, the glory that combat would bring him, but is stuck on a farm taking care of a pig.
Prydain's finest warrior draws his last breath.
But Henwen is a special pig, able to produce prophetic visions. In the books, she does so via letter sticks pointing to different symbols like non-magical trained animals.
That was absolutely her favorite word. And she could not stop pressing it.
But in the film, her oracular nature is meshed with the book's mirror of Lynette, a natural pool of water that reflects back the inner truth of whomever stares into it. Thus, movie Henwen goes into a trance to reveal images in a scrying basin.
And from you I do beseech knowledge that lies beyond my reach.
This entire sequence is immaculately animated, with only a little light recycling of the dread spirits from Night on Bald Mountain.
That's Henwen!
He knows.
Dallben tasks Taryn with getting the pig the hell out of Dodge, and I just love how he brushes aside shit on the table. Just look at it again. The books and candles are part of the background, and exactly when Dallben goes to move them, they are now animated foreground. There are multiple instances where this film does that, avoiding the whole, gee, I wonder which brick I should press video gamey thing. There are a lot of little things of that nature throughout this film that show just how good these new animators were at their craft.
I'm not afraid of the Horn King.
Then you are a very foolish lad.
Quote right out of the book, and with that our protagonist heeds the call to adventure and starts on his Campbellian journey. We are then introduced to our villain, the creepy and menacing Horned King, voiced sepulchrally by John Hurt.
Soon the Black Cauldron will be mine.
Now, a lot of people criticize the Horned King for being a little boring, and true, he doesn't really have personality quirks or a lot of one-liners, but boy does he have presence, and the voice Hurt dredges up from the abyss is no small part of that.
Yes, oh yes, then you will worship me.
From here on out, basically every other Disney villain up to like Shan Yu is some level of fruity, and that makes them memorable in the sense that you kind of want to be them.
See how I glitter.
But the Horned King is very effective as an antagonist, as an evil force to threaten our heroes whom you need to see brought low.
How long I have thirsted to be a god among mortal men.
He may not want to dress up as the Horned King for Halloween, but he sure may haunt your nightmares later. As we return to our assistant pig keeper, I just have to comment on the animation again. Growing up, my mom would gush about the artistic techniques of the Golden Age and the Restoration, and one thing she would always highlight is how early Disney did water. And the Black Cauldron's water scenes are just as exquisite as Snow White's, the shimmering reflections, their shapes broken by ripples. And as Taryn goes to quench his thirst, he is granted a vision, perhaps from Henwen, of himself as
the greatest warrior in all Prydain.
And this distracts him just long enough for the pig to run off.
Oh no!
So off he runs to find her. And who does he run into but the most divisive character in this entire movie, Gurgi.
Nice apple.
I have met many people who loathe Gurgi, comparing him to Jar Jar and other annoying side characters, but personally, I've always found him lovable and charming. And I really need to get my hands on a Gurgi plushie, though unfortunately the official ones are pretty cursed. What have you seen, Gurgi? Point at the doll where the bad man touched you.
Oh, poor, miserable Gurgi.
There's also a surprising amount of overlap between Gurgi and Gollum. Both characters talk in a kind of sing-song rhyme and act very childlike, and Andy Serkis's performance as Tolkien's creature in the Jackson films is very similar to John Byner's take as the Shaggy Ape Man here. Now, while some people have claimed Serkis based his performance on Byner's, I have not been able to find any actual evidence for this. Nothing from Serkis himself on the subject. However, the two are a bit too similar for it to just be coincidence. Unfortunately, Taran is not as enamored with the furry fellow as I am, and is ready to beat him with a stick until Gurgi mentions having seen a piggy around.
Big snout.
Yes, yes.
Ponytail.
That's her, that's Henwin.
Taran, he just described literally every pig. But before Taran can confirm anything, Henwin can be heard squealing in the distance, and while Gurgi bolts for safety, our pig keeper sprints toward the noise to find his lost pig. The chase of the Gwithaints is perfect, visceral and tense, with poor Henwin and poor Taran getting knocked about and grabbed, making our pig keeper, I believe, the first Disney character to canonically bleed. He desperately sets off after them, pushing through dead trees and scaling cliffs until the Horned King's castle is revealed. Fun fact, they recorded all new sound effects for this film. The previous entries of the canon had mostly relied on stock sounds that they had accrued over the decades, but the new generation wanted to do everything they could to make this film stand out. Gurgi shows back up, Taran calls him a coward, and Furball watches despondently as his would-be friend ventures into the home of the enemy. Here we go, y'all, the first Disney film with a sex worker.
And I'll die with a smile on my face.
Here in the Horned King's Great Hall, we're introduced to a Disney invention, Creeper.
Going somewhere, Creeper?
I guess Disney wanted someone for the Horned King to talk to, so they gave him this little goblin guy. He's fine, and he does get some decent lines later. But personally, I would love to enter a room the way the Horned King does. Fire and lightning, a gaggle of henchmen staring at me in terror and awe. Yes, please.
Bring in the prisoner!
Jesus, they put fucking manacles on the pig. That's how you know they're evil. Creeper tries his best to get Henwin to show a vision, but his first attempts go nowhere.
Why, yes, sire. You're quite right.
And when Creeper goes at the pig with a hot coal, Taran can't help but intervene. He's glad to be reunited, but at first refuses on principle to help the evil king.
Very well. In that case, the pig is no use to me.
Holy hell, beheading a pig like a fucking criminal. Jesus. We're in the Dark Age now, can't tell? But this threat is sufficient to make Taran acquiesce.
That's better.
However, note to self, when you're a big bad evil guy, don't creepily walk up behind the hero you've captured or they'll get water in your eyes. Taran tries to escape, but after getting Henwin safely into the moat, he gets caught by Creeper.
But you let the pig go, didn't you?
It wasn't my fault.
In the dungeon, Taran is free to reminisce on his mistakes.
Do it. I can do it.
But soon enough, the floor pops open and he meets a pretty lady. Princess Eilonwy is pretty much identical to her book counterpart, though at no point does she get to swing a sword or spear around. She does get all the best lines, though.
Oh, what a pity.
Her bauble is one of several items in the film that were done in a computer. It, a boat at the end, and the cauldron itself were all rigged up in a program that determined how they should move, rather than trying to painstakingly animate a solid object without its shape changing in any way from frame to frame. But what was done by hand are the shadows the bauble creates with its light, and they are just insane. The new animators must have made a dark pact with Walt himself from beyond the grave to achieve this. It is exquisite. Having acquired a new sidekick, Taran follows Eilonwy through the bowels of the castle looking for a way out, and they get to talking about why they're imprisoned.
But my pig can tell the future.
Ooh, how interesting.
I have that saved as a GIF on my computer. I love it. They stumble upon a tomb and find an ancient king buried with a shiny sword.
He must have been a great warrior.
But when they hear Creeper loading up more bodies for the Horned King's corpse harem, they decide to skedaddle.
Let's get out of here before they come back.
It's at this point that Eilonwy notices what Taran brought with him from the tomb.
Well, he's not going to use it.
Unfortunately, as entertaining and engaging as Eilonwy is in her first scenes, she does basically nothing else plot relevant for the rest of the movie. Largely that's a consequence of the source material, as especially in the middle 3 books, the princess really didn't do much, but she did get a couple moments of heroism and plot importance here and there, and it would have been nice if she'd gotten something to do in the back half of this film. That is my main critique of this movie. Eilonwy needed an arc, just like the other 3 main characters. Speaking of, we finally meet our 4th lead as he's being tied up in prison, Fflewddur Fflam.
You seem an intelligent sort of chap to me.
He's voiced by Nigel Hawthorne, who is absolutely perfect as the stuttering minstrel. Anyway, it turns out the Horned King, not a fan of bards.
Oh, hello.
He has a harp that gets cranky when he lies.
Shush. Why do you have to judge every word I say?
Otherwise, he is not particularly relevant right now beyond some comic relief. He will be important later.
Make haste. I must save myself.
After freeing Fflewddur, Taran and Eilonwy make their escape, but our pig boy gets separated from the princess.
You little scut.
That's a word we should use more often. It sounds like a slur, but means basically nothing. Anyway, it's here that Taran realizes he stole a magic sword, and god damn is it beautiful. A literal singing sword, and Taran is ecstatic to use it. Called Dernwyn in the book, it's actually Eilonwy who finds it and holds onto it until it can be given to a nobler warrior than Taran. In the second book, a slightly more mature Taran is given a brooch that gives him wisdom and foresight, and ends up playing a similar role in the story that the sword does in the film, as we shall see in due time. But for the movie, where they had to condense things to fit the runtime, it makes perfect sense for Taran to have the sword, and gives him a very fitting character arc. But I'm getting a bit ahead of the movie.
Stand aside, I command you. Get out from under my feet.
Our heroes escape with the help of the magic sword, leaving Creeper to inform his boss what just happened.
I always get blamed for these things.
I think we can all empathize with poor Creeper. He's just trying to do his job. He does not get paid enough for this. He opens the door to find the Horned King just sitting in the dark. Is this what he does all day? Just stand in a dark room like a broom in a closet waiting for his minions to bring him updates? Like, imagine you're at work and you open the door to your boss's office. There are no windows, no lights on, not even his computer, but from the light from the hallway you can see him behind his desk just sitting there looking at you. How fucking creepy would that be? Creepy horny man is surprisingly chill about the mass prison breakout that just happened and orders the Gwythaints after Taran, whom he knows will eventually find Henwen. Meanwhile, our 3 human heroes have made camp by a lakeside with more gorgeous water animation, and Eilonwy does the girl thing and sews up Fflewddur's torn pants.
Yes, I shall sing of your deed.
However, hilariously and subversively, she's not very good at it. Still, this leads into an argument between our boy and our girl.
What does a girl know about swords anyway?
Girl? Girl?
Sorry, young lady. She does not take kindly to being condescended to.
How dare you take his side?
They each storm off, but after cooling down, they reconcile.
Fflewddur is right, you know. You're going to have to work together.
Just in time for Gurgi to come back and assault Fflewddur.
Help! Murder!
With Taran back, Gurgi behaves himself and is introduced to the rest of the party.
Who is your pungent little friend?
Fflewddur is understandably suspicious, but Eilonwy instantly finds him charming.
And pungent, too.
When Gurgi claims to have found Henwen's tracks for real this time, it's the princess who believes him.
Gurgi not lie. Not this time.
Neither refuse to give help when it is needed, Medwin continued, nor refuse to accept it when it is offered. It is this set of relationships, this friendship square, that forms the core of this movie. Because what is the opposite of war? It's friendship. Building a community. Taran is at first dismissive of his companions, but comes to respect and rely on them. Getting to know people you at first disagree with or dislike can lead to better understanding. Helping others can lead to them helping you in turn. You'd be surprised what you can gain when you strive to find common ground with those you meet. And our 4 heroes are united in a desire to stop the Horned King. And Gurgi makes good on his word, and the companions find themselves at the shore of a small pond. Of course, this is a fantasy adventure, so it's trapped, and they all get sucked down a beautifully animated whirlpool. This brings us into the kingdom of the fair folk, who have a fantastic musical theme. Upon waking, the new friends come upon King Eileg and good old Dolly, the only one who ever does anything around here.
How the blazes did
Despite his protests that his whirlpool was perfect,
Evidently not completely perfect.
Is everything that happens around here my fault?
Are you here on a friendly visit?
he is convinced to retrieve Henwen.
One less thing for old Dory to worry about.
While he does so, the rest of the fairies come out to take a gander at the humans, including a Tinkerbell cameo.
Tell me, is the burning and killing still going on up there?
You refer to that joke on humanity, the Horned King.
What a line! There are definitely certain individuals around today that I would refer to as jokes on humanity. But on the subject of the Horned King, Idleegg reveals that the fair folk know where the Black Cauldron is and agree to lead the companions to it. That is, it is agreed that Dolly will do it.
What?
In the meantime, Idleegg says he'll see Henwen safely back to Caer Dallben, allowing Taran to check that off his checklist and focus on the mission at hand. I do at least appreciate that Taran asks Eilonwy to come with him, rather than telling her to go home because she's a girl, as Book Taran would have. It turns out the cauldron is hidden in the marshes of Morva, even though Fflewddur questions Dolly's directions.
Yes, I'm sure.
This leads us to the best characters in the movie, the witches, Ordu, Orwen, and Orgoch.
Evil, nasty people. You shall all be turned into frogs and eaten.
They represent the neutral option, third parties who view themselves as too powerful to be concerned with the conflict, neither on the side of the heroes nor on the side of the Horned King, but they will help. For a price. Although first Orwen gets in a little light comedic sexual harassment.
Can anyone here perform marriages?
It is a bit uncomfortable, but it's also rather funny, particularly when Frog Fflewddur gets stuck in her tits. That is a sentence I just uttered because yes, that happened in the Disney movie. This is where we are. All part of Disney's desire in the early 80s to capture an older demographic. Of course, Taran will only let his friend get molested for a minute or two at most, and out comes the magic sword and a demand for the Black Cauldron.
It's a trick.
Ordu tries to redirect them toward more mundane cookware, but once Dernwyn starts singing and slashing, she decides she must have it, and agrees to give the companions the cauldron.
That's not what I said. You weren't listening.
I'm sorry, forgive me. I'll let you explain for yourself.
We never give anything away. What we do is bargain, trade.
Fflewddur and Gurgi in turn offer their most prized possessions in exchange, but are rebuffed.
Who would want...
Hold it, sister. Not so fast.
I'm hoping that Eilonwy doesn't offer her bauble, which she does in the book, because that had to be cut for time. Finally, Taran reluctantly offers the magic sword.
With this sword, you could be the greatest of warriors.
As I previously mentioned, in the book he offers the brooch that gives him visions of the future, but for this story, having to offer up the possibility of being a great warrior, what he most desires at this point in his journey, is very fitting.
Agreed. We have made a bargain.
With more glorious animation, the cauldron erupts from the earth in all its evil and menace. Unfortunately, this is one of the parts where important context was cut, thank you, Jeffrey. Namely, Taran and the others trying to break the cauldron with sticks and such, which would make this line make more sense.
Does they know the Black Cauldron is indestructible?
Here we learn that in order to stop the evil of the cauldron, a living being must freely enter it, giving up their life to do so. None of the four are willing to commit suicide at this juncture, so as the witches leave, the group despondently settles around a campfire. Dolly, having done nothing to help out with the witches, sticks around just long enough to yell at our heroes.
I've had it. Goodbye.
This leads Taran to start wallowing in self-pity, and it is Eilonwy who gets him out of his funk.
I believe in you.
However, I have no heterosexual explanation for this. Unfortunately, just as our friends have roused their spirits, it's time to get captured. Gurgi fucks off one more time, and the other three are hauled back to the Horned King's castle along with the evil cauldron.
I'm sorry. I've ignored you.
Creeper is having the time of his life, which is more than can be said for our three heroes.
I wish I'd stayed a toad.
Enter the Horned King, who is ready for his close-up, Mr. DeMille.
Arise, my messengers of death. Our time has arrived.
This is the best part of the whole movie. I keep praising the animation, but it fucking deserves it. I just wish I could see the unedited version of it. The whole sequence was heavily cut per Katzenberg's orders because in its original form it was deemed too scary for children. Allegedly, some kids in that infamous test screening ran out of the theater screaming and crying. People have tried to reconstruct the awakening of the Cauldron Born from production stills and storyboards and clips from old trailers, and it is a shame that Disney has never taken the steps to restore it properly. Y'all put entire extra musical numbers into Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King for their IMAX re-releases. The least you could do is go back and reanimate this sequence. But even in its incomplete form, it is still some of the best animation ever put to film and a deliciously horrifying scene. Of course, the Horned King has to commit the cardinal sin of villains and leave the heroes alone with the MacGuffin, thinking in his arrogance that they pose no threat any longer.
Yes, of course. You did it, sire.
Little does he know, Gurgi has finally grown a backbone and sneaks in to untie everyone. And honestly, if he hadn't run away, he would have been tied up with the rest of them right now. Even cowards can have a part to play. But Taran has decided what bravery means to him, and he has chosen to sacrifice himself to end the cauldron. But Gurgi won't let him.
Taran has many friends. Gurgi has no friends.
And Taran realizes too late what that means, and can only watch in horror as Gurgi plunges into the cauldron. When I was a kid, I was bullied. Through elementary school, and especially into middle school, I had basically no friends, and was constantly teased and harassed. At the time, I had no idea why they did it, but looking back, I can see that honestly, I was kind of a weird kid. I used big words, I preferred books to other people, I would say out-of-pocket shit for no reason. But none of that is licensed to bully. My peers had decided that I was a little freak and wanted nothing to do with me, so I sat by myself on the bus and at lunch and in class. The teachers often loved me as I knew all the answers and consistently got good grades, but that didn't equate to popularity with the other kids, so I would retreat into fiction, both books and films. And when I saw a shiny VHS clamshell called The Black Cauldron that had a kid with a massive sword on it, I was immediately entranced and got my parents to buy it. I wore that VHS into the ground. I would watch that movie over and over again. I would ask my parents and sister if they wanted to watch it with me. But at the time, I didn't really think too hard about why I liked the film so much. Surely it was the fantasy world building, the monstrous Gwithaints, the singing sword, the cunning witches, the hellish horned king. As a kid, I never really thought too hard about why Gurgi's sacrifice hit me so deeply, why watching that scene would make me start to tear up. When I got to high school, things got better. I found other nerds to hang out with who I could be myself around. I started to mellow a bit and become more aware of my surroundings, more aware of others' feelings. I had found my Eilonwy and Fluter and Gurgi, as though I too was a Taran destined for greatness. It wasn't until college that I started to reflect a bit more on my childhood, partly spurred by hearing what other students from my high school had thought about me, that I was arrogant and obnoxious and dismissive. That in elementary school I was kind of an asshole, and that may have been the real reason why I was ostracized rather than any more innocent quirks. It turns out I really was like Taran, convinced of my centrality in the narrative, unaware of everything else going on around me, only caring about others when they were useful to me. It's taken me a long time to recognize that, to unlearn those behaviors, and it's something I still struggle with. Because empathy isn't just a passive thing that sits in you, it's an active choice. You have to choose to think of other human beings as people with thoughts and feelings and inner lives of their own. It's so easy to retort when someone insults you. It's so easy to let anger or hatred consume you. It's so easy to yell at someone or punch them. It's hard to take a deep breath and de-escalate. It's hard to forgive and to mend broken relationships. It's hard to admit that you were wrong. I'm just thankful that my realizing this didn't come at the cost of someone's life, as it did for Taran. Remember those people I mentioned who loathe Gurgi? They find this scene funny, Or they say good riddance. They're glad Gurgi is gone. Gurgi, who just wanted to be included. Gurgi, terrified of all the things around him that could hurt him. Gurgi, who looks a little different and talks a little different. We need to remember where that kind of thought leads. When bullies who don't like the people who look and talk a little different grow up and come into positions of power, they use that power to continue to bully. We've talked about wars over resources. We've talked about wars over differences of opinion. But what about wars over not liking how someone looks or talks? From a certain point of view, the Horned King is less evil than that. He just wants to kill everyone and make them zombies, indiscriminate and uncaring. But in the coming videos, we'll see villains like Gaston and Frollo, who have very specific ideas about what makes someone worthy of dignity, worthy of life. As Taran finally realizes Gurgi's dignity, the castle starts to fall apart around them. The Horned King is understandably concerned about this.
Perhaps it needs another body, sire.
Yes, yours.
Taran, however, approaches the cauldron, desperately hoping that he can save Gurgi. It is here the Horned King catches him, but no real fight ensues. Taran doesn't defeat the Horned King with a swing of his magic sword or by a cunning trick or ruse. In his arrogance of trying to send an innocent to their doom, the Horned King is caught by the cauldron's death rattle.
No! You'll not have me! My power cannot die!
Man, what a way to go! Creeper is ecstatic that his boss isn't around to choke him anymore, but our three heroes are weighed down by the loss of their friend as they escape the collapsing edifice. As they reach shore, the cauldron re-emerges, taunting them. Of course, the witches also return to take back the evil pot, but Fluter finally grows some balls and steps up.
We never give anything away. We bargain. We trade. Remember?
The witches briefly argue, but finally offer Taran back the magic sword, the destiny he always wanted, and he rejects it.
What would I do with a sword?
Instead, asking for Gurgi. There is another oft-repeated criticism of this film that Taran is just a whiny little shit. And that's true. For the first half of the movie or so, he is exactly that. But that's on purpose. It's so he can grow from there and change for the better. This scene would not hit as hard as it does if he hadn't started off as a whiny, naive, dismissive idiot. He has finally realized the importance of his friends. I have no cause for pride, Taran said, taking his usual place on the familiar bench. It was Gwydion who destroyed the Horned King, and Henwen helped him do it. But Gurgi, not I, found her. Doli and Fluter fought gloriously while I was wounded by a sword I had no right to draw. And Eilonwy was the one who took the sword from the barrow in the first place. As for me, what I mostly did was make mistakes. My, said Dalbin, those are complaints enough to dampen the merriest feast, though what you say may be true, you have cause for a certain pride, nevertheless. It was you who held the companions together and led them. You did what you set out to do, and Henwen is safely back with us. If you made mistakes, you recognize them. As I told you, there are times when the seeking counts more than the finding. Does it truly matter, Dalbin went on, which of you did what, since all shared the same goal and the same danger? Nothing we do is ever done entirely alone. There is a part of us in everyone else. You, of all people, should know that. From what I hear, you have been as impetuous as your friend Fluter. I have been told, among other things, of a night when you dove headfirst into a thorn bush. And you certainly felt as sorry for yourself as Gurgi, and, like Doli, striven for the impossible. The witches at first refuse, but Fluter manages to goad them.
You've got no real power!
And they finally accept.
We have made a bargain!
Gurgi is returned as a lifeless body, but as Taran weeps into his hairy chest, life stirs in him.
Munchings and crunchings in here somewhere.
A happy ending for all, and all head off into the sunset.
Gurgi's happy day!
This is one of my favorite movies in the entire canon. second only to one I have yet to discuss. Like Alice in Wonderland, it's a comfort movie, one I could watch every day on repeat were I allowed to. But since most other people have not seen The Black Cauldron, that makes it hard to find folks to discuss it with. Is it a perfect movie? Absolutely not. There are animation errors all over the place, the plot's a little shaky, and as previously mentioned, Eilonwy turns into basically a glorified doll for the second half. But despite all that, it shines out like a diamond in the rough. It has some of the most wondrous animation in the canon, and it's full of weird characters, and is the least Disney movie that Disney ever made. It's eminently quotable, and I cannot recommend it enough. Watch it immediately if you haven't already seen it. Also, as of recording, Lorcana has announced there will be cards from the Black Cauldron later this year, so my fingers are crossed we get a really good Horned King card. The Black Cauldron may not have featured vast armies and battles, but it is certainly just as potent an argument against war as the original books are. But where the books focus on the loss of life and the destruction of property, the consequences of war,
Tell me, is the burning and killing still going on up there?
the film focuses on what can be gained by working together. Taran learns there is more value in friendship than in feats of arms. He fights off some of the Horned King's henchmen, sure, but that's entirely the magic of Dernwyn. He's basically pressing a button for a QuickTime event. The cauldron is acquired, and Gurgi is returned by arguing and bartering with the witches. Taran and Eilonwy reconcile by talking to each other and actually listening, and not just shouting over each other. Fluter learns to tell the truth and to stand up for it.
Oh, pull yourself together, madam.
And Gurgi learned to help his friends, and his friends helped him in return. Friendship makes you stronger. Knowing how to swing a sword or shoot a gun does not give you power. They allow you to kill, certainly. But if you stand alone, a gun or a sword will not save you. That's what the power of friendship is. It's not some bullshit Care Bear stare magic. It's being able to rely on others. It's coming together in numbers against a threat. So why war? Is any war just? There is only one just war. War against the warmonger. The Horned King sought to conquer the entire world and cast them into his evil cauldron to make them unthinking, unfeeling soldiers. Are we expected as pacifists to just lay down and let him do that? Absolutely not! Pacifists must still fight. Fight to prevent war. Fight to prevent oppression and indignity. Fight to save lives. But fighting can take many forms. It doesn't have to come from the barrel of a gun. It can be in lines of protest across a highway. It can be tearing down a statue of a slave owner. It can be standing in front of an abortion clinic to prevent forced birth fascists from harassing those just wanting to control when they have a child. Once you have courage to look upon evil, seeing it for what it is and naming it by its true name, it is powerless against you, and you can destroy it. But the warmonger is not just the overt aggressor who raises armies and seeks to conquer, like Putin in Ukraine. The warmonger makes laws to persecute those who look different and speak different. The warmonger passes laws to cut social services and reduce taxes on the rich, for yes, class war is still war. If an employer doesn't pay their employee the true value of their labor, this is wage theft, which is just as much a theft as if they went into their house at night and burgled their valuables. I know I've already lost every conservative and centrist watching, so let's go full leftist. Borders are war. Saying if you were born on the wrong side of this line, you don't deserve any rights if you cross it is war. Deporting people who have committed no harm simply because they lack documentation is war.
Fat George has declared us in rebellion. Why in bloody hell can't they?
We need to start calling things what they are. The Republican Party, in its current form, is waging war. Not just in the Middle East where it drops bombs, or elsewhere in the world where it imposes tariffs, but upon American citizens and immigrants by denying them health care, by denying them affordable education and housing, by defunding scientific and medical research, by aiding fossil fuel companies and accelerating climate change. Republicans might not be aiming physical, literal guns at us, but the result is the same: impoverishment, displacement, and death. And in many cases, enforcement of their decrees is done by soldiers with guns anyway. It is all war, and we need to start fighting back. Because when pacifists talk about wanting to end war, they're not talking about revolutions against unjust dictatorships. They're not talking about slaves fighting for their freedom. They're not talking about union workers striking for better wages and working conditions. They are talking about those in power sending armies to foreign lands who have no business being there, attacking other human beings to steal their resources, or because they worship the wrong gods, or because they look or talk different. And that's one thing I like about the Horned King as a villain. He is clearly in power, the establishment, and our valiant heroes are fighting to dethrone him. No, the war pacifists want to end is the senseless war, the war of stubbornness, of arrogance, of cruelty, the warfare of escalation that has led to nuclear proliferation. Terence stared at him in horror. You would not dare to use the cauldron against your own kinsmen, your own people. This is even more foul than treachery and murder. Do you believe so? Morgante replied. The cauldron belongs to him who knows how to keep it and how to use it. It is a weapon ready for a hand. What we now call the peace symbol was originally explicitly a symbol against nuclear weapons. They represent the semaphore symbols for the letters N and D, nuclear disarmament. While the Black Cauldron is an artifact from Welsh mythology, when Lloyd Alexander wrote about it in the 1960s, the threat of nuclear annihilation likely weighed heavy on his mind. Like Tolkien before him, he had seen firsthand the toll of World War, and the stalemate between the United States and the Soviet Union threatened at any time to break out into a conflict that would kill everyone on the planet, just as the Horned King wished to do. While Disney's The Black Cauldron may have been the first film in the canon to feature not a single song, I think there's one that's very appropriate for this very topic. When you attend a funeral, it is sad to think that sooner or later those you love will do the same for you. And you may have thought it tragic, not to mention other adjectives, to think of all the weeping they will do. Well, don't you worry. No more ashes, no more sackcloth, and an armband made of black cloth will someday nevermore adorn your sleeve. For when the bomb that drops on you gets your friends and neighbors too, there'll be nobody left behind to grieve, and we will all go together when we go. What a comforting fact that is to know. Universal bereavement and inspiring achievement. Yes, we all will go together when we go. We will all go together when we go. All suffused with an incandescent glow. No one will have the endurance to collect on their insurance. Lloyds of London will be loaded when they go. We will all fry together when we fry. We'll be French fried potatoes by and by. There will be no more misery when the world is our rotisserie. Yes, we all will fry together when we fry. And we will all bake together when we bake. There'll be nobody present at the wake. With complete participation in that grand incineration, over 8 billion hunks of well-done steak. We will all char together when we char. And let there be no moaning of the bar. Just call out a Te Deum when you see that ICBM, and the party will be come as you are. We will all burn together when we burn. There'll be no need to stand and wait your turn. When it's time for the fallout and St. Peter calls us all out, we'll just drop our agendas and adjourn. And we will all go together when we go. Doesn't matter if you voted yes or no. When the air becomes Uranus, we will all go simultaneous. Yes, we all will go together when we all go together. Yes, we all will go together when we go. I am of course thankful to my Patreon patrons, including but not limited to Gurgi85, Jinx KB, Savannah Mighty Zebra, Tony Houst, Bewilder Eye, Jekko CBL, Daniel Özbjörnsen, Sugar Cubed, Glider, Lord Christine, Andrew T, Agent Shifter, Husky Trent, Lemon Lamb, Laura, and Barden the Labyrinth. This content is sponsored by viewers like you. It's only $5 a month, or 10 if you want me to say your name at the end here. I've also announced some patron stretch goals at which I will make some fun music videos. Either way, join me next time as we peer through our magnifying glass at the Great Mouse Detective.